And we're live from the Hotbox studio at the Jazz Farm. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share this link with anybody, and I think that this is very important for everybody in the cannabis community to pay attention to. So even if people couldn't join us on the live, if you can please share the link on your socials. If you have any comments, this is basically going to be a summary of our workshop that we held today around the community guidelines for our police reform project. And we really did have a very animated morning and bit of the afternoon trying to work out how we're going to structure these community guidelines. And I'm joined in the studio today by some very, very special friends, Gernot and Neil from the University of Bristol. And of course, you all know Amy and Mike from 420 Central and the Soweto Cannabis Association. Community involvement is really at the center of this first stage of our police reform project. It's so very, very important because in South Africa, as a democracy, we always need to involve the people every single step of the way. And we certainly cannot reform policing of cannabis in South Africa without really concerted, serious, and carefully considered input from our communities who have suffered under prohibition for so many years. So this project was actually born many, many years ago. It's not something that was just dreamt up overnight. It was a rational progression from the project that Fields of Green for All did with universities of Bristol and Cape Town around cannabis in Africa. And as you know, we always say that we want fields of green for all South Africans, and all citizens of the world. So we really want to be an example for our continent, because as we know, there's gross human rights abuses happening with cannabis all throughout Africa. We're having the liberalizations of medical and industrial programs while citizens are still being arrested in the street. And you know, since Jules and I started this back in 2010, the police have always been at the center of everything that we do. So this is the culmination of many years of work, both on the part of Fields of Green for all the cannabis communities in South Africa. We couldn't have done this without you, and of course our international experts. So I would like Gernot to please introduce us to the Cannabis Africana project and how this all came about, because that certainly was a very exciting time gathering all of that research throughout Africa.
Okay, thanks a lot, Myrtle. Thanks a lot for inviting us. Definitely worth the long journey to South Africa. As Myrtle said, we are from the University of Bristol, but we have been working with the University of Cape Town and with Fields of Green on the Cannabis Africana project, Cannabis and Development in Africa. And this was a 4-year project from 2021 to 2024 that looked at the role of cannabis in people's lives across different African countries, actually not just South Africa, but also Zimbabwe, Nigeria and Kenya, and found that it played a very important role in people's lives, very different, diverse roles. And one element of the project looked at the changing policies because, as you are very well aware of, some countries like Zimbabwe or like South Africa significantly changed their policies towards cannabis during that period. So our research sort of looked at how these policy changes also affected people's lives and their interactions with cannabis. And one sort of major result of the project was that while the laws or the policies might have changed with cannabis, the practices didn't actually change too much. And there's continuities of, for example, how the police was interacting with cannabis. And in a way, the sort of one of the results was that prohibition, even though it changed in law, it continued to some degree in practice. So the current project that we are now working on with Fields of Green for All and Cape Town, again, the University of Cape Town, is actually to think about how we could change the practice of institutions like the police, because that's really what's hopefully going to make a difference. And that's, I think, why we have come here to think about those guidelines on how police could deal with cannabis in a post-prohibitionist approach. But I'm really happy to be here and develop this further.
And we've also always said that we like to surround ourselves with experts. So
You're
that
the real
is in
expert.
that is in practice today. And I'd just like to give a shout out to our absent experts. Unfortunately, Simon Howell and Kelly Fortune from Cape Town had to get the last flight out back to Cape Town this afternoon, so they couldn't be here for the live, but they were here this morning. Simon, as you know, is a criminologist, and he is actually working for the city of Cape Town now. But he will always be a feature of this project, having been our original criminology expert back in 2017 for the trial of the plant. And those of you who attended the workshop in Constitutional Hill in February would have heard me say that Simon and I were sitting in court back in 2017, and he whispered in my ear, "Don't worry, Myrtle, one day we'll get the police." Well, that day has arrived, and these plans are really starting to shape up really, really nicely. Kelly Fortune has also been part of our wider group, part of the Cannabis Africana expert committee. Kelly works for the Western Cape Department of Health. So in a lot of ways, she's our kind of secret weapon, because we all know after the edibles ban last year what havoc the Department of Health can play. And she certainly looks at our issues from the inside, and she certainly hears the stigma at work every day. And then another expert who couldn't make it to South Africa due to visa problems and the current situations in the country was Clemens Rusenga. Dr. Rusenga is an expert in land and agrarian studies. He is at the University of Cardiff, and he's also was very involved with Cannabis Africana and is monitoring the situation in Zimbabwe very, very closely. And working with Clemens is Neil. Yeah, so Neil, tell us, you've just published a paper about Kenya.
That's right. So yes, as part of the Cannabis Africana project, my focus was on the Kenyan side of things. So doing research, not so much with farmers of cannabis in the Kenyan context. Kenya seems to import quite a lot of its cannabis now, especially from Ethiopia, quite a new trade that's developed over the last 20 years or so. But yeah, so my focus was really on lives and livelihood, especially urban livelihoods in the Kenyan context. So working in various parts of the country with people who are, trading cannabis in various urban locations and seeing how they deal with the police, actually. So this element was quite important there, how they mediate their relationships, often, through bribery and so forth.
And we still have full prohibition in Kenya?
Still full prohibition.
Yeah.
The debate is getting hotter, really, in Kenya. So,
yes.
And there's a current court case that's been brought by the Rastafarian community in Kenya, which they're hoping to push further along. So the debate is there, but full prohibition remains.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we know that the Rastafari communities who bring these various court cases around the world, there's often little hope of success, because it's very difficult to allow the use of cannabis for one group of people and not allow for another group of people. But when these cases are brought forward, they amplify the conversation, even if legally maybe they don't have too many prospects of success. They do take the conversation to the general people. So we really like to keep an eye on everything that's going on. There's whispers that maybe there's a bit of liberalization in Nigeria. We don't know. But certainly when I was in Kenya in 2023 for the Summit of the Future, I didn't want to land up in an African jail. And, I always take cannabis with me wherever I go. But when I went to Kenya, I only took one little vape pen. I was just like, I was traveling on my own in another African country. So commiserations for our Kenyan colleagues and our other colleagues all around Africa. We're doing our best to be an example. So together in October last year, when we kind of launched this project, we also put together an expert panel from all around the world. And that was really interesting. And you can find the edited version of that expert panel webinar on our YouTube channel. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe, for doing the live stream today. you'll find that webinar there and go and watch it, because you will see that various experts around the world sometimes have differing views. The guy from California, for example, was just like, the police must just kind of stop it. But then the guy from the UK was saying, well, police also have their mental health and all of that. So some experts were quite sympathetic to the police, and some experts were like us, oh, stop the cops. So that formed, that was really our first webinar that we had. And then we had the February workshop in Constitution Hill. So out of the 25 submissions that we got, we made a summary out of what people were saying about their relationship with cannabis and the police. And I just want to read through quickly so you can get an idea of the range of issues that came up. We weren't really discussing solutions. We were wanting to highlight the issues. And most importantly was inconsistent and contradictory enforcement. That was across the board. Everybody brought that up, And ongoing unlawful searches, seizures and arrests, confusion regarding private use rights. It doesn't matter how many blogs or how many hotbox shows or how many webinars and seminars and whatever we have, there's still major confusion around private use rights. Selective enforcement and corruption. Well, don't we know that, insufficient training of police a bit later, but this morning the issue of the snareman came up, because with your association there's many snaremen, many guys who's selling a gram at a time or a little Lucy spliff at a time. And after all of this is all about harm reduction, and you can't only reduce the harm for some people and not reduce the harm for the street level dealers, and Amy will be preaching harm reduction forevermore until she's old and grey, because this is all about harm reduction. So the poor, the township and the rural, we hear you, and we're looking for solutions to that, because those are the people who are the most profiled and picked up on the streets and maybe don't know their rights, and maybe
can't pay a bribe
and all of that. Lack of recognition of cultural and indigenous knowledge systems. Under the UN, we've got all sorts of rights. We've got indigenous rights, we've got cultural rights, we've got all of these rights under the big umbrella of human rights that you always hear me bleating about. So the recognition, there's no way that your common and garden policeman knows all about constitutional rights even, let alone human rights and indigenous rights. So that lack of recognition came through. And the continued criminalization of conduct many communities believes fall within the constitutional protections. Oh, we've had some bit technical issues here in the hot box. It seems like the internet is really not just not playing ball, but we will put this up on YouTube and monitor your comments later today and answer any questions that you might have. So, my Joe, can I just carry on from where I left off? So I'm carrying on from where I left off. And I was just explaining that we had this community involvement has got two parts. So the first is, obviously we've done the submissions, and now we're putting together the guidelines, and then these guidelines need to be introduced and explained to law enforcement. So there's community and there's law enforcement. And it really is the ultimate harm reduction program, because at the end of the day, who is the problem? It's the police. That's what everybody is so scared of, and it's our lack of regulations and our grey areas here in South Africa. But when it comes to communities, we always say that you need to know your rights, but this morning we came up with a really nice byline, which was know your rights, but also
responsibilities.
Right. So Amy, being our harm reduction director, what, if you know your rights, what are those? And if you know your responsibilities, what are those?
Well, I think your rights, by now we know you have the right to personal consumption, cultivation and possession. And our rights don't really extend further than that. You know, we are still working on the trade element, but if you go to our website, you can also go and check out your rights because it's important to know them full stop. Like that's harm reduction in itself. And then I think the responsibility side, things have expanded and shifted and grown so much that it's no longer just the harms of prohibition, or, you know, we've always said the perceived harms of the plant outweigh the perceived harms of the plant.
The harms of prohibition far outweigh the
perceived harms of the plant. That's it. And I think it's maybe shifting a little bit now as well, whereas as the market grows, as products grow, as people grow their knowledge and start experimenting more, we are seeing more harms coming out of lack of regulation and lack of any kind of quality control. So having the responsibility to yourself, your community, your environment, and your members, and everyone really. So we have the responsibility to make sure we keep everyone safe and have quality tested products, work with integrity, don't aid in corruption and bribery. You know, all these things contribute to the bigger picture of harms.
And I think also, you know, when it comes to the police, and I'm sure I know, Mike, that you have this in place for the 420 Central clubs. Tell us about the importance of access control.
Well, in terms of access control, as far as the 420 Central context, is every single time when a member shows up to the store, they have to be a registered member, or else they have to have an identification document, either be an ID, a driver's license, or a passport. No temporary documents are allowed. And then after that, then we'll sign them up for membership, and then they will be able to access the property. And then before they can access the cannabis, we need to allocate something that is a tag for a particular grower, because remember that our members are represented in different forms. We've got a grower member, we've got cultivating members, we've got processing members, and so forth. So a cultivating member will then take the tag that belongs to a particular member and grow the desired plants for that particular member for them to start sharing within the club. So we do not sell cannabis, but we share in services. And when there is a transaction that takes place, they're paying for labor and they're paying for space. So that's basically how we operate within our club. But we make sure that our gate stays locked, and then when you enter our club, we've actually used to have like an open presentation of cannabis, but we've moved it to a room further into the house so that at least they can see our reception area, get a bit of information and a bit of education before they can access that space, so that once they get there, they are fully knowledgeable about what they want and all the harm reduction measures that we have in place.
And I think that that's absolutely key for when we deal with the police, that you can't just, you don't just walk in and buy weed and there's a whole shelf full of bottles of weed behind the bud tender. That's it's super, super important. And then we also had a bit of a discussion this morning about staff training. We've still got a long, long way to go when it comes to bud tenders. What do you at 420 Central do about your bud tender training?
For one, well, we used to connect with Chiba, because I knew from the first time when I started as a bartender before I was the owner. And then I took a course with Chiba that basically teaches you about the strain, how to be able to weigh, and knowing the different types of cannabinoids that exist within the plant and all that. So that information is very important, because not everybody that is coming through your door is expecting just to get a high. Some other people want to treat ailments such as inflammation, or maybe the person has done chemotherapy and they need fecal oil to help them gain an appetite, how to basically microdose with all of that. So there's technicalities in being able to share cannabis goods to somebody, because it could either turn them off as far as them taking higher dosage of what their body can take. So it's very, very important that a bartender knows how to communicate. And bear in mind that a bartender is not a doctor, so they won't be able to write the script, or they can't advise as far as an ailment is concerned, but they could give you exactly what theirs could try to treat in that particular space.
Yeah, exactly. So they can at least advise on the first step for using cannabis. I mean, we know that that if you're using the right cultivar, it can make you sleep. And we know that it can give you an appetite. And we know that if you can eat and you can sleep, when it comes to people who are coping with health issues, at least we can guarantee those two things, which can help with any sort of ailment, eating and sleeping. But we certainly do not encourage people bartenders to act like doctors or anything like that, because we are in the business of private clubs. We are not dispensaries, and we were just saying this morning that word dispensary should be banned completely, because everybody knows what we all feel about Section 21.
Unless you're a registered pharmacy, then dispensary away.
Yeah. So there's lots to deal with all of these different establishments. And Cameron from Rolling Stoner magazine also sat in with us in the workshop this morning, and it was very interesting because he has visited over 700 stores, and he doesn't even use cannabis, but he really, really understands it, having visited all of these stores. So we certainly got quite a good community perspective from him. Okay. Then that's the communities and the standards for the establishments, and we're going to be working on the standards for the Snyman, and we're working on the standards for the suppliers and all of that. But then we move on to law enforcement in order to maintain very specific conditions for arrests, not no arrests, because that the police are never going to buy. Simon came up with this whole chain of events that should happen when a member of the police encounters cannabis or cannabis use, or an establishment that is offering cannabis to its members. And this was really was the framework for our workshop about enforcement. So the purpose of this cannabis policing under the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act, not the Medicines Control Act or anything to do with medicines, only the Private Purposes Act, only dealing with that with the Police Reform Project. The purpose was to ensure that all cannabis-related policing is lawful, consistent, proportionate, and so on and so on. The legal foundation is we want to try and create an instruction that all of the top cops can give to the lower cops so that they know what to do. And the core operational principle of this is that cannabis is not presumptively illegal. Because the way that the police are acting under the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act at the moment is that all cannabis is bad and it's illegal. And if you don't pay me a bribe, I'm going to arrest you. So every encounter under this project, and what we're going to propose, is that every encounter must begin with classification and de-escalation, not enforcement and arrest. And that is the bottom line. So you have to classify. First of all, the cop stops you on the side of the road, hauls you out your car. The first thing he has to ask is, how old are you? The second thing he has to ask, where are you? You're in your car. It's your private space. So that they have to first classify your age, then classify your location, then assess whether it's a private place or not. Is it a private place? If it is a private place, the police need to walk away. They really need to walk away. And then, is it a public place? Is the person using cannabis in public? Is this against the law? Yes, it is. Then an assessment has to happen. Are you going to arrest this person, or are you going to give them a serious warning? That's also possible. Then the dealing test, which they can apply at any stage. And obviously, we've said this over and over again, that if you are going to be done for dealing, there has to be marked notes, an undercover cop, or video or photographic evidence of cannabis and money changing hands. Now, we did have a little bit of a difference of opinion about this issue of packaging consistent with distribution. Like if the guy gets caught with 100 little 1 gram baggies in his pocket, is that a presumption of dealing? Well, we don't believe that that will actually hold up in court, but that's one of the ones, nothing is definite with this project. There are some of the things that we're going to have to clarify as we go along. And then, okay, you have established that now this person is over the age and you think that they're dealing, then it's search and entry. Either they're going to search your car, or they're going to search your establishment, or they're going to search your home, which they shouldn't be in your home to start off with, okay? Is there a warrant? Now, there's everything that you need to know about warrants is on our website. And I've got to move Frank over here because he's getting a little bit antsy. Before any search, is there a warrant? Is the warrant valid? Now, one of the things that the police often use is, but there's drugs and there might be other drugs and that we have to come in. Now, that has to be very, very carefully established under the Policing Act. It's actually Section 22. So all of these things will be in the law enforcement side of the guidelines. And then the policeman or woman has to make a decision about the arrest. Is arrest necessary? Only arrest if there's risk of flight, risk that the evidence is going to be destroyed, or there's a presumption of another really, really serious offense. So firearms charges and all of that. And we know lots and lots of people who spent many time in jail for having an unlicensed firearm or ammunition, all of that. Only break one law at a time. And then there's seizure. If the police are going to seize that evidence, it has to be recorded. And then there should be mandatory recording of all cases and all details of all cases. So basically, if the police, this is our guidelines, okay? We're not saying that this is something that the police have already put into place. The police should ask the following questions. Is the person an adult? Is this a private or public setting? Is there actual evidence of dealing? Actual evidence of dealing. Is the conduct clearly outside lawful limits? Is any enforcement action necessary? If there's any uncertainty at any point, the police should revert to non-coercive action. And so that's just a very, very brief outline of all of that. And I think that, wouldn't you agree, Gernot, that kind of outline of this chain of events when somebody is arrested is quite easily translatable into other countries?
Yes, I think there's a potential, especially because our project actually looked at other African countries that are changing their policy on cannabis. So the aim potentially, this is maybe for a future project, but the idea is that what we are exploring here in South Africa might actually be applicable in Zimbabwe, in Ghana, and other African countries that are dealing with very similar issues actually. So who knows?
Very similar issues. And we are all going to be at the International Cannabis Symposium in Cape Town. These guys are leaving tomorrow, we're leaving on Wednesday. And I'm sure that there's going to be loads more conversation around this. And we're also giving a little bit of a shout out to those people who have got solutions. For example, the South African Cannabis Club Association have got a pilot project going for a hub, which might be a solution for the Sneemana. We certainly are looking forward to speaking to them about that. Also, organizations like Grow in Africa, and most certainly the Ponderland Plug Project. So we're not alone in this, and we're going to try and take everybody along for the ride. Everybody in the whole of Africa and everybody in South Africa who's been working so hard. We're also going to make the ride a little bit bumpy for those people who are professing that they are making various cannabis establishments legitimate, whether it's for medicine or whatever it is for. We know that there's a lot of people, well, not too many, maybe 2 or 3, that are charging a lot of money to try and shield you from the police. And we just say, as always, smoke some more weed, read the stuff again, watch the videos again, and do you really need to pay these people all of this money to make you legitimate? So the ride is going to be a bit bumpy if those people are in attendance in Cape Town, because we're tired of our communities being ripped off. We really are very, very tired of it, and we hear about it all the time. If somebody comes to you and says, I can make you legal, red flag, red flag. So, what are the next steps? What are we going to do next, Michael?
I think in regards to spaces like Soweto, touching on the point where the people in Cape Town have created some form of a hub, it's kind of like a localized support in terms of compliance, in terms of growth, for people like in Soweto, so that when they access the product, it's not highly priced and it actually is tested, but those resources need to be around for Sowetans. And also finding out what could be like, especially from a policing point of view, how do we let the local station commander to know that there will be cannabis projects that are happening in the area? Because I remember with us launching the Soweto Cannabis Association, we did approach the station commander and he told us about JOC and all applications that we needed to kind of like apply for. In a way, it seemed as if he was kind of like kicking us out of his office, you know, instead of just engaging with us, because what we wanted to do is to educate them more, even as police. But education for me is key in all areas, whether be it in the community, whether be it in the people that are opening businesses or the law enforcers or even the local stakeholders. You know, once at least there's education within that space, there will be an understanding and a navigation through all of that for us to have at least a level playing field to establish businesses or to establish models or to establish key guiding nodes that will be for the public. Because I mean, you come to Soweto, my grandmother still calls it a gateway substance.
Yeah.
You've got people that are on drugs and they put cannabis to it. You know, I mean, Nyaupe is a pandemic in the hood, but then it's also attached to cannabis because they use cannabis. You know, so there's also the kind of things that are, and also the kind of stigma that are still attached to cannabis. So once we get rid of the stigma, for me, I think it's easy for us to share the information and start establishing and build the building blocks to this community and industry that we want to open.
Absolutely. So well said, brother. Yeah. And then Amy, don't you think, as harm reduction director, don't you think that one of the main forms of harm reduction is actually educating the lawmakers? How are we going to do that? How are we going to do it?
Well, we've been trying and we have offered. But I think my favorite, as I mentioned to you guys earlier, my favorite quote of today, I think, was, you know, we've always said various things about the police and fought with them and challenged them and that kind of stuff, but redirecting the police and, you know, not stopping them, because the police have a vital role, especially in a country like South Africa. Yes, that comes with its own loaded things, but educating the lawmakers, I mean, the law enforcers and the lawmakers is really, really important, so that they know how to do their jobs efficiently and effectively, that they understand the basics of the plant. You know, even with the act, once the act is active law, because it still is an active law, it'll reclassify cannabis to the fruit and flowering tops, and a law enforcer needs to know what the difference is between a plant and veg or a plant that's flowering and how to enforce it, because my plants that aren't flowering when the act becomes law, they're not illegal, and a policeman's not going to be able to really differentiate that right now.
They'll just see those leaves.
They'll just see leaves, panic, oh my goodness, pull it out, you know, invade my right to privacy and cultivation.
And Neil, what would you say was your main takeaway from today?
Oh, well, I think lots, and you touched on them really well. And I think that know your rights, know your responsibilities, I think was a really good way. And,
Golden nugget.
and what Amy's just spoken about as well, the redirecting of the police in those kind of ways. But my own sense was, I think, a sense of hope as well. That, you know, it's quite a hopeful moment, like devising these things that you know, one thing that's really needed, probably, you know, not just in the policing of cannabis and not just in South Africa, but policing in general, you know, in the UK and everywhere, is just to rebuild and, you know, really construct and more trust between
Yes.
the community and the police. And it feels like these kind of guidelines where, you know, people can know where they stand and, you know, you can, that can be a way of rebuilding that trust in some ways. So I think, for me, the takeaway was a very hopeful one.
A hopeful one,
Yeah.
yay! So, as far as next steps is concerned, we are going to do our homework and compile these guidelines from these two very important angles, from the community and from the law enforcement. And remember, we not only talk about police, there's law enforcement on lots of different levels. And we're going to be searching around, whether it's on a local level, a metro or city level, a provincial level, or a national level. We have to kind of sniff out the good cops or the people who are looking for change for that. And then we've got to cling on to those people who will listen to us and then hopefully foster the relationships going forward through those forward-thinking law enforcement officials. Okay, we've got a few up our sleeve already, but we must say that the Madlanka Commission and the horrific stuff that's coming out of that commission has kind of slowed the project down significantly. And this morning we did have a slight little shift in our strategy, in that we were going to go straight to Pretoria, to head office, you know, when we first started speaking about this project. But it doesn't look like that's possible. So we're going to maneuver on a local level, on a metro level, and most certainly on a community level. So as soon as we have a first nice draft of this, we will put it out for public comment. And we certainly do welcome your comments on that. And once we've got all of the public comments in, then we will actually publish these guidelines and distribute them far and wide, and we'll do hard copies and we'll plaster it all over the internet. And then we have that concrete thing that we can go and move forward with the next part of the project, which is the actual policing post-prohibition, the data-driven approach. And that is when we'll really be bringing in the experts on all sorts of different levels. And you won't hear so much from us, except to report back to the communities. Because I think when it's dealing with the actual hierarchy of the police, we have to defer to the experts. Because they'll see me coming and then just think, oh, she's going to wag her finger at them, you know. So we're hoping that by starting this project with the community, we will be able to identify the correct channels to start dialogue with law enforcement. We might not be able to start with the SAPS, but there's many different levels, and we will wheedle our way in there somehow, because as we always say, we will never give up until we achieve fields of green for all. So thank you very much for joining us today. We're sorry about the glitches with the live stream, but as soon as we have the full video up, we will let everybody know all over social media, and you can go and put your comments, and we will follow on the YouTube comments and answer any questions that you might have. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.